maybe.
Okay, and that was a little weird, but we are back to the second official Groupcast for A.R.'s Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I am A.R. Minabala, and today I am joined by Tara A. Lake, Laurie O. Honestly, I always forget the pronouncing of your last name. I usually just call you L.O. from IG. And, and then we have Adam Gaffen and Jahmil Effend. How is everybody doing?
Pretty good.
Lovely.
Yeah, I am. I'm more than geeked to get this rolling. But before we do, where can everybody be found? Tell people where you're at, what you're doing, your works, everything. Give us a lowdown.
Who wants to go first?
Laurie, you already did it. Go ahead.
Oh, well, great. So where I can be found is Instagram. I just started a TikTok page, which I'm not sure about if I'm going to continue, but I'm on it. Facebook. I have a website. And yeah, my book is on Amazon and in both print and ebook and in what now they call a flip book. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. And I'm working on a second book right now, which is complete take off from what I have been writing. So excited, pretty excited.
We'll definitely go into that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Tara, you want to follow suit?
Sure. This is Tara A. Lake, and I am found on Instagram under that handle. And my website is taraalake.com. I've released my first novel, Age of the Elmech, which is a multi-genre novel, and I'm just currently working on book 2. So it's a series.
We'll definitely get into that later.
Yeah.
Ja, you want to follow? It's already kind of going in that circle. I kind of like that.
Definitely. You can find me inspiredbyjamil.com or inspired by Jahmil on Instagram. You can find The War in the Fallows, first book in the High Council series, on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, paperback and print and ebook. Our audiobook is coming out in 2 weeks, so you'll get the link to that later.
And Adam.
Yeah, so you can find me at my website, CassidyChronicles.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram, Adam Gaffen, very easy to find. I have 3 books out in the series right now. The 4th book is published in about 3 weeks, and I'm writing the 5th book. All of the books that are out are available in paperback and ebook, and the first 2 books are available as audiobooks. The 3rd one is being recorded.
Very nice. And honestly, that can kind of lead into the first question. How does everyone feel about audiobooks? I've done some research myself, and just the amount of money it takes for production versus like how much money it seems to net the average person. I mean, even like successful books. It just seems it's one of those things that it would have to be, I would feel like it was something to reserve for later. But at the same time, you really want all your marks checked, right? Especially when it comes to marketing and getting your book out. So, and again, I don't even have my first book out yet. So what do I know about anything? How does everyone else feel about that? You can just respond first person.
Yeah, I'll jump in since I think I have the most experience with them. Mine lag about 6 months behind. So I have the books out first in ebook and paperback, and then I get the audiobook done. I happen to find a really excellent narrator. So I don't want to let go of her. She's a professional actress. So she brings a lot of skills to it. And given the cast of characters in my books, the wide range, she's got to have the skills to get them each distinct without getting confused, and she does. So like I said, the 3rd book is being recorded now. Once that's out, and it's really a very finicky process. Audible ACX is very particular about their standards, and even once you have it all up to their standards, it's supposed to take 30 days for them to review it. It's been running about 45 to 50 days. So unless you have the book done literally 4 months ahead of your release date, there's no way, as an indie, there's no way I can coordinate everything that closely.
Mm. And then how do you think that that reflect? Do you think it's a worthwhile venture in order to go into that and make that investment into the audiobooks?
Oh, absolutely. See, one of the things that happens is that as she records them, she posts up a chapter at a time for me to review. Those files I can download. And so when I post a chapter up on my website, I have all these sample chapters and I do one a week for each book. So as those sample chapters go up, I also put up the sample of the audiobook. So they get to hear that chapter as well if they want, after they read it. So I'm thinking the more of those I have, the more I'm able to put out there, the more people are going to say, "Oh, sure, yeah, I'll buy this." And when they're selling, the audiobooks are selling for $20 plus, and as the author, you're getting 40% of that. It adds up, and it adds up pretty quickly. It doesn't take a lot to, make a nice stack.
No, yeah, that's awesome. The only reason, and I'm glad that to be hearing that, because the only reason I'm a huge math person. So immediately I did like some research into the numbers, and from 2017 to 2019, audiobooks saw an increase of sales of 75% across the board. But then if you do that on the actual sum of what that it totals, it was only a 10% of the market, meaning ebook and print, paperback, hardcover still make up 90% of the market. And it was just right there that I just saw, I was like, all right, for the investment, especially that in my book, I had this idea of having multiple narrators, that's multiple voice actors, multiple productions, a sound engineer. That was an easy 2,000 for an investment of already within the book. It just seemed like one of those things like, doesn't seem like, it doesn't seem feasible, but I'm glad hearing that because audiobook is awesome. And it's the wave of the future. They did have an increase. So you could easily see within 10, 20 years, it would be a lot higher stake in the market. But for right now, it just seemed it was one of those things.
My whole thing is that what genre do you think works particularly better with audiobooks? Ooh. Who would benefit the most from actually producing one? Would comedy work better? Would sci-fi work better with audiobooks? What audience would buy into it the most to be beneficial to anyone who's either creating them or buying them?
I really think you just hit kind of like the tip of an iceberg there. I think there's a lot to unpack with that. A lot. It really brings into the question the whole genre. I immediately thought of like the comedic thing, right? You have like a person that's running some like intense erotica, and like their narrator just isn't like that into it. So, oh yes, baby. Oh yes, baby. She said.
I actually heard. Did you ever hear Godfrey reading 50 Shades of Grey?
No, but oh my God, I need to. What?
It's hilarious. It's hilarious. If you listen to Godfrey read 50 Shades of Grey, you'll never want to read it.
Oh my God. All right, I'm in.
Yeah.
Does
So that kind of book, I don't think you'd have to get the right voiceover actors to do that book, because I don't think a book like that would be feasible in audio.
Oh my God.
So AR, back to your point first. You said, it's 10% of the market, but how big is that market? How many billions is that market? 10% of $100 billion market, that's a lot of money.
It's like $4. Oh my God. No,
and then any genre will work. I've listened to audiobooks for years, even back to books on CD and books on tape. Any genre can work if you have the right narrator. If you have the wrong narrator, I don't care how good the story is, it's not going to work. But I would say in general that any book that relies heavily on dialogue is going to do better as an audiobook, because it's that natural inflections that you want in there. You want the readers, the listeners to hear the conversations as you imagine them happening. Whereas a book that is heavy on the exposition, Dave Weber comes to mind. I mean, he writes page upon page upon page upon page upon page of exposition. And that's really hard for even the best narrator to get through, because it's just so much, it's a data dump. So it can be, but across genres, I don't necessarily think it's specific to a genre.
Tara, any thoughts on the subject?
Yeah, I enjoyed the audiobook process, to be honest. When I was working with my narrator, we were going back and forth pretty much every day. Just he'd send me some updates, I'd review it, listen to the whole thing, read the book alongside it, and then send him some corrections and things to look at. So I thought it was a great process. And I know a lot of people that, at least that I've connected with, they've been super interested in the audiobook version, even more so than the others. Like they've been like, let me hear the narration. And then when I got the snippet with the 5-minute sample, from there, everyone became super interested because it's just a different way to hear the story. And for a lot of people, because you can listen to it during your commute, you can drive and put it on, it just helps them get through the book that much faster. And yeah, I think it's one of the ways to go, especially if you haven't explored it. And for me, it wasn't that expensive. So the narrator I went with, we negotiated down to, I think, $100 an hour or something like that. And the audiobook lasted 7 hours. So it took him a while to produce, but a lot of the narrators that I was like aiming for, they were giving me timelines of 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 weeks, even if they just read the book through. The hard part is really just the corrections. And that's the piece I didn't realize going in, is that there's a lot of little mistakes people make when they're reading. And no matter how good they are, there's going to be a word that gets messed up or something that cuts out that you want fixed. And you have to be on it because that's going to be the final product at the end. So that's what I noticed when I was doing this first one. And I definitely say, like, I've been waiting already, I feel like a month and a half, and I don't know when this book is coming out because they don't give you a deadline. They don't tell you when. So they don't. It just drops. So I'm just waiting for them to send me the email that the book is ready for published.
Right. Congratulations. Your audiobook is live. Here are some code. Here are your promotional codes.
Yeah, it's wild. Like I was calling them like, oh, when is the projected date? They're like, whenever we get to it. So you definitely have to.
Whenever we get to it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you, I'm pretty calm now, but you tell me some shit like that, you'll see different sides of me real quick. You'll see 50 Shades of Angel.
No thanks.
You can't tell me that type of shit. I lose my mind. Oh my god, that's something.
I don't really have much to say on the subject other than that I think as an indie author, it's important to have your book available on all platforms so that you can hit, all those targeted readers. I haven't done an audiobook yet, but I plan to for sure. And I think that will be something just down the road, as I maybe make some more sales and just kind of find my footings as an indie author, because I've only released one book. So it's a little bit at a time, So yeah.
I would definitely say I'm more on your end with it because, like I said, I haven't even released my first book yet. I'm still in the line. It's just that like how I work is just I'm just thinking steps ahead and everything in the future. But the audiobook thing, I don't know, I guess gives like anxiety. I've done sound engineering before, and there's nothing that makes me want to go bald more than that, just because, well, I can't say makes me want to go bald as much as it just ends up being the end result because I'm pulling my hair out.
That's the good thing, not to, cut in or anything, but before I lose the thought, that's the brilliant thing about being an indie author. I went traditional publishing. So unfortunately, there are good aspects to traditional and there's certain good bad aspects. One of the bad aspects is that they have the rights of where they want to publish your book and how they want to publish your book.
Yep.
So anything that you may want to look into when you do traditional publishing, even if it's a non-vanity publisher or a vanity publisher, like one of the big ones like Random House or anything, you have to basically ask permission for you to try something different. And you have to live with their answer. So if you want to go ahead and do audiobook, they can give you the reasons of why it's a good idea and why it's a bad idea because of the markets that they're trying to sell your book in. They also give the option, this is a good point too. It's how I feel about illustrations in books. The book I have out, I had some art done for it. I didn't put it into the print book, but when I started writing it, I had it up on Wattpad. And on Wattpad, you're able to put art, media, music, anything that you would want in addition to kind of paint the scene, you could. So I had art that I had commissioned, which came out beautifully, which I don't mind because there's just so much sometimes that you can actually, at least I find, that you can describe and convey to a reader. And at times, I felt like I wrote such a beautiful scene. I would really love to have this described in a piece of work. So I had them commissioned. The same thing with the current book that I'm doing right now. There's lots of images that I had done, especially because if it's a fantasy novel, I like having illustrations so I can actually see what they're describing. The book that I have out now on Inked, I had pieces commissioned, especially because it's a fantasy book involving werewolves, which I put in quotes because they're not werewolves. They're not even lichens. So I wanted the reader to be able to see what what the beasts look like. And it's the same kind of thing. You have a decision to make. If you want to do an audiobook, that's great. Go right ahead. If you want to add illustrations in your book, terrific. But that's the difference with, I think, with indie authors. If I had the ability to do it, I would have done it that way because then at least I'm open to what I would have wanted to do. But because I went traditional, I'm somewhat limited. So even if I wanted to do audiobooks, there's a possibility because they sell worldwide, there's certain parts of the world that may not have the availability or the market for audiobooks, especially with translations. Not everybody speaks English.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they did. That's so weird.
And something else to consider for Tara, especially since you're on the first book of what you project to be a series, is, if you decide to do the audiobook, then you have to make sure that your narrator, once you find that perfect voice, that they're going to be willing to stick with you. And because there is nothing more jarring than to be listening to a series of books. I don't know if any of you know the Hollows series by Kim Harrison. So I've been listening to it, and they had one narrator for the first 5 books, and she did a really good job, and the voices all fit. And then for whatever reason, maybe she wasn't available for a book and they're on a deadline, they got somebody else in for the next book. And the first hour I was listening to it was just mind-wrenching because it doesn't sound like the characters are supposed to sound. Now, she was only in there for that one book. I'm on the next book now, and the previous narrator's back. But so that's something to consider when you're looking at a narrator. It's just like looking at the person who does the cover art, who your designer. I've used the same designer for all the books in this series. And now she knows the series almost as well as I do, so she can come up with a cover, basically like that. I tell her, "Oh, Emily, I need another cover," and she'll say, "Okay," and I'll have it in a week, and it'll look like, the one behind me.
Oh, behind you. I thought you were there. I thought you were in the spaceship.
No, Wi-Fi is not very good out there.
Yeah, I thought that was what the delay from before. Now, what I think Laurie brought up like a really interesting point, because I'm a huge art person, and illustrations is the big thing that I have included in my book. But in the same degree, I remember when I was like 14 and like forums first came out for books, and I was like so excited to hop on a forum to read about like what other people thought about Percy Jackson and that whole saga. And I remember one person was talking about how distraught they were when they finally released a picture of Percy, because the whole thing is they were pretty smart. They never, in the graphics and the illustrations, they never showed his face. It just kind of like it was always like the background or something like that, or like like there was a shadow covering or something. And then they released a picture that was like a full bio of like all the characters, and there were a lot of people talking about how much it annoyed them, because it was the exact opposite of how they had envisioned the characters. So it's like their imagination just basically got invalidated by.
They did that with Game of Thrones too. They did that with Game of Thrones. They did a comparison to what the show versions to how they're described in the book. Vastly different. Same with their ages. I
know that was a big one.
Yeah, I think especially the one with Jon Snow
and Daenerys. They were both like 14, 15.
Yeah, and they aged them about 10 years in the series, because of course it's what they feel is going to be suitable for standards.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Anne Rice and her characters. Claudia in the first Anne Rice book, The Interview with the Vampire, she was only 9. I think younger, 5 or 6, and they aged her to about 10 because they thought it was more appropriate for the movie.
Either that, or that could have just been a practical decision.
Yeah.
A 10-year-old is more likely to get their lines right than a 5-year-old.
Well, also too, though, her daughter, Claudia is based upon her daughter, and her daughter died when she was 5.
Okay.
So, but
I'm just saying that may have been a practical decision rather than an editorial decision.
Right. But my point, the point is that, you get, yes, illustrations can either make or break a book. Just what you think is going on in your mind is not, as a reader, is not necessarily what an author has in theirs when they're constructing and building their characters. So yeah, it can kind of be like, oh, womp, womp, womp. That's what Percy looks like, completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that's an interesting segue, because it's something that I have been kind of thinking about. And I feel like the answer might be like a through line between a lot of people, but I'm interested to see if it differs. What do y'all, now I'm Southern, what do you think is the most important aspect of writing? Like in your point of view, what is the thing that drives the story the most?
In mine, it's characters.
Characters to what degree?
Who they are, what they look like, what their names are, and then I build it around their name.
So it's more of a visual thing to you.
Well, they don't leave me alone. It's like my characters don't leave me alone until I'm done with the book. And even then, their voice is always in the back of my head. Sequel, 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 hello, hello, like knock, knock, knock. It's, it's like they constantly yabber and chatter in my head. And until I get it all out, they don't shut up. They just keep talking.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like the first book that I ever wrote, I write my stories and my books based upon the dreams I have. So 2 of them My first one was a dream. I woke up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and I wrote it down. And for some reason, his name just stuck. And and then the same thing happened with the second one. I had a dream, but I always kind of knew that I wanted to write how I grew up. But it's extremely, we talked about this when I was first on. But it's all a dream, and all of the characters are always in my head, and they don't stay quiet. They don't quiet down until I'm done with the book.
The most important aspect of a book kind of depends on the genre that the author's writing. Because I like dystopian, post-apocalyptic soft sci-fi type stuff. So I'm writing, possible futures, and creating, different worlds sort of thing. So to me, world building probably goes hand in hand with characters. They're equally as important for the work that I'm writing. Yeah. What about you guys?
I definitely, it's something that we talk about in like privately, like off air. I think very specifically that world building, exactly what you said, they go hand in hand, and honestly, depending on the genre, one kind of goes above the other. It's like a neck and neck race, and they're always battling. The reason why is I think at its heart, and it's taken me a while to understand it, especially like when I was a kid and my favorite shows like Lost and everything like that. The thing that drew me to those type of shows was the enigmatic mystery. That's kind of an oxymoron, but it's kind of like the enigmatic, themes surrounding the story and all the things unanswered and everything. And I remember when it got to them ending it, I was watching an interview by the producers and the writers, and they were saying how people always ask them what they were going to do with all these mysteries. How are they going to answer? There's so many ties untied and all these, I's without dots and T's without lines crossing them and whatnot. What are you going to do? And they were like, oh, at the end of it, like the thing that we care about is character development. That's the thing that like drives the show. And I remember when I heard that, that's like, that's such a cop out. Like, I want to know, why are there polar bears on the island? Give me that answer. I don't care about Jack that much. But then I watched the last episode and I realized, yeah, I care about Jack a lot. I just lost like a friend. And right there is kind of when it dawned on me how naive I was in that thought, and how really, no matter how much you put into your world, if you don't have believable characters that inhabit them, there's nothing that world building is going to do for you. And it goes vice versa. If you have the most awesome characters ever and your world building is just flawed, then it leaves glaring holes in your characters.
It's true. And if both are done quite well, the world building can almost feel like a character as well, right?
Yes.
And you fall in love with that aspect of it, and it's like, wow.
Like, I think my favorite thing that I've noticed in character development is when you start to like a character so much that you as an audience are excited just for moments that might happen in the future. Like, I remember when the whole Marvel series was coming up and Infinity Wars was coming out, I remember reading forum posts on forum posts of people excited just for Tony Stark to be in the same room as Doctor Strange, because they're both kind of like condescending, a-holes, and they kind of like talk in that way. So people were just geeking out on the conversations they were going to have just on that alone. And I'm like, yeah, that is what you want in writing, that you develop characters in such a way that you just geek out with, oh man, wait till Haas meets this person though. Oh, their personalities are really going to clash. Or wait till this person gets put in this environment. Like when you develop a world so much that people just start kind of adding on later. I think it was Adam that said it, and I really hope it was you. That you were saying,
give him credit for something he didn't say.
Exactly. If anything, just nod, because it was a really smart thought, and it was that what is not shown in the scene is more vital than what is shown when it comes to like movies and TVs, and the same translates into writing. It's like when you world build, the things that you kind of just leave in the fringes that aren't being written about, the little nuances, that's the Hemingway iceberg logic. What you leave unwritten is way more vital than the things that you're talking about. It's like I can't remember what musician said it. The notes that you don't play are just as vital as the notes that you play. It's the pauses that are just as important as the actual, music.
Yeah, the negative space.
exactly, as any artist could tell you as well.
Yeah.
I mean, and that just,
Exactly.
what was
Huh?
that?
I said that's exactly why I don't like reviews. And my husband keeps saying, "Why are you reading them? Stop reading them." Because a lot of the times, people who are reading and reviewing your book, they don't get it. They don't get the negative space that you sometimes leave out for a purpose, and or like revisit later on. They don't understand, and they don't understand that the world that you're building. So like there were plenty of times where if my book is being reviewed, I was going through a book tour, and people are reviewing the book, and they're completely misrepresenting what my characters are doing, saying what they're not going through, what is not being shown. And there's all reasons for that, because it's a part of the world and the characters that I'm building. But then there are some people that do. So it's kind of like, well, if you're building a world that you know exactly what's going on, where you want it to go and how you want it to end, and a reader doesn't understand that, well, what do you do? How do you explain it to people?
If I can be honest, no, I'm sorry. Finish your thought.
No, I'm done.
Oh, I'm sorry. So because I used to have that when I first started like releasing my short stories on Reddit, and how I've kind of just landed on as far as like my philosophies on it is that you can only, and I responded to you when we talked about it in the group chat. You can only control your writing of it. You can't control perception. I remember I got really mad because there was a short story that I wrote that I mentioned a political person's name, but it wasn't because I was trying to like bash them or like amp them up in any way. I made it just as as a timestamp to understand that this world that you're in has a relevance in the one that we're living in. Know what I mean? And a whole bunch of people responded saying that they're like, "Oh, this is political, blah, 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 blah." And I remember at first I was kind of like distraught about it, but then I realized I was like, "Hey, you know what? I kind of did that to myself though, because I put that name in there. And if I really wanted to convey the same thought, I could have just said, a blue or red tie, just gone meta with it. And then it was just like I understood like then that like basically any point of view a person has to your book is valid, because it's like their point of view. It's almost like when you're arguing to a person, like when you're arguing with a person that they're calling you XYZ, and you're like, "Oh, no, I'm not mean." It's like, no, but that's their opinion. No matter how you argue it, they're right from their opinion, from their standpoint. Mm-hmm. So that's like, I don't know. I guess it's one of those things that, and even then, I guess like my own opinion is going to change like over time and how as I grow as like a writer. But from what I took from everything that Reddit threw at me, because I'm telling you, if you start on Reddit, that is the battleground. They don't care. There's none of this Instagram, "Oh, let's all be friends." Nah. Yeah. They're coming for next.
I think the biggest thing that the reviews point out is, if somebody gives your book a poor review, they just simply weren't your targeted audience. And even if there's somebody who reads, for example, my novel Age of the Elmech is part dystopian. So somebody who reads that book is expecting, like a Hunger Games, that classic sort of hero journey. But it's also got some other elements. It's, post-apocalyptic, soft sci-fi, speculative fiction. And it was highly inspired by Game of Thrones. So I've got 9 character POVs. I've got over 50 characters in the story. Like it's this whole world, and it's an epic. It's like, 225,000 words. So someone diving into this book that's expecting that classic hero's journey, they're not going to get it. And I've had a couple poor reviews because of that, because they go into it with these expectations. Meanwhile, I've had amazing reviews for people who have just fallen into this world and been blown away, and they're the targeted audience for my novel, right? So I think just remembering a positive review is just somebody who simply is your reader, and a negative review, sometimes we can learn from them. One thing I've learned is how to market my book better, because readers who are loving it are comparing the world building to Lord of the Rings. And
Damn.
that thought never even entered my mind. So I need to learn how to tweak my marketing for those to attract more of those readers. You know what I mean? So I'm learning from these reviews, even though some of them, you know, are 3 stars and they're not great reviews. I'm learning so much. And then you get the odd review where you're like, I just can't take anything from that. And that's just simply not my reader. This is somebody who doesn't read dystopian or sci-fi at all. And they're just, maybe they shouldn't have even reviewed the book because they didn't like it that much, but they're allowed to, right? They're allowed to have their opinion. And yeah.
Very well said, I think.
Yeah.
And if, no, go ahead, Adam.
Oh, I was just going to say on the world building. Well, Angela, you read Cassidy Chronicles, so it's just what I do is just, you know, a dab here and a dab there, you know, in terms of if, you know, relating it to painting, just little details, because it's hard science fiction, but it's also set only about a century or so in the future. So it's not that radically different than it is now. So I want my readers to fill in the gaps with their own experiences. You know, the rest of the world can be, it's a blank canvas for them to paint their thoughts on. And I just have enough in there for, okay, this is how the story's moving, because it's all about the characters and how they're interacting and what they're doing, and less about the world that they're in. You know, you know, as the series has progressed, it's gotten more into world building in the traditional sense, because now I'm creating a whole, you know, there's a whole space culture going on, which I have to create, and I have to put that in, and I have to design that. But the first book, which is
oh my God, your hand just got cut off.
I didn't feel anything. But the first book, you know, takes place on Earth in, you know, the future broken up United States, and so it's not that strange. It doesn't need to be, you know, I do the very broad strokes and give very, okay, this happened and that happened, and let them make their own conclusions as to, you know, what's going on.
I think that was a great segue, and I don't know how we were telepathically aligned for that, but yes. And if I can highlight Tara's book, a theme about Tara's book just a little bit, just because I think the way, talk about world building, I mean, like we talked about on your episode, it truly, honestly blew me away. So her book starts with a prologue that basically, is it okay that I go into this, Tara?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so her book starts off with a prologue that is basically builds the world, that kind of like sets the stage for what's going on, which is kind of, as you were saying, it's a dystopian thing. There's a water crisis and there's a whole bunch of other elements going on, right? And then it breaks from the prologue, and then right from the prologue, it goes into a set of rules from her world. So if you're kind of going by it as like a movie, it's like like the entire world was literally set up, like the foundation, the stage was literally built with wooden pylons. And the moment the stage is set, she comes up and tells you like, oh, and these are the rules of the world. And then it goes into chapter 1 from the point of view. And from a world building standpoint, and just a formatting standpoint, and just everything, because I think, I believe it also starts off with a map, right in the chapter 1, like right in the top of it, if I'm not mistaken. And, you know, it really has stayed with me. Just like with future ongoings and everything, just the way that you set that up from a plotting standpoint, it was just beautifully engineered, if I can be completely honest. And going with that thought, one, how did you come up with that, and how do you go into world building in general?
Thanks, that's a really nice compliment. Not a plotter, so it was pretty much a shit show. Everything was, it was a mess. It was an absolute mess.
That's what editing's for, right?
I think
oh my God, preach.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think the prologue took probably more drafts than the actual book itself, because it was such an important way to introduce the world and basically explain how they got to where they are. So Age of the Elmech is basically about a civilization that survives, 4,000 people that survives following a global water crisis that like knocks out the world. So setting up that prologue and just kind of proving, okay, what happened with this water crisis and how did they come to accept a master rule? So these 4,000 people sort of vote in 2 masters to rule these 2 separate colonies of people, which are divided by a lake of like toxic waters. And so the prologue kind of hints at that. And then you see the list of 40 laws that this society has to follow. That was just kind of like a fun addition. There was really no like genius scheme behind adding those laws in there. It was really just like, okay, it's a big world. There's lots of characters. Let's pop these in here so that a reader, as they're reading, can maybe reference back to see, oh yeah, that right. Law number 30 is, you know, can't merge, and you know. So, and then it was just kind of like a cool introduction, right? Like it just flowed nice. And then you see the map of the world to reference back to just for visualization. And then chapter 1, world building. I again, I know I mentioned this to you before. It kind of came through layers of drafts, right? Like editing, just like character development comes through, you know, draft after draft, and you kind of hone in on the details that you want to highlight in your story. But yeah, I looked at things like, you know, the laws, their clothing, what are these people wearing and why is that important for them and their world? What are their rituals? What are their beliefs? What are their death? You know, what do they do surrounding death and burials? Because that's something that sort of highlights a lot about a civilization, right? Trying to think what else. I did make some notes here too, because I'm not good on the spot. I'm so social classes is another huge thing. Are you going to have social classes in your society, and what distinguishes them? So clothing can do that, or symbols. The Almec wear crests that basically like represent their house or their family name. And these crests can be silver or they can be gold. So it just kind of, you know, another thing that touches on their social class. Yeah, that was I think really all I had to say. I just kind of, again, those things I don't think strategically go into draft 1 thinking, oh, I'm going to look at all of this. It was one of those things that came throughout drafts that was like, okay. Oh, and sorry, the other thing that was important with the world building for me was constantly relating anything I was adding in for world building, was relating it back to the water crisis and like the main plot of the book. How does this affect the water? How does this affect them solving this crisis or their lives directly, right?
Well, I can
Does
tell
that make
you,
sense?
oh, it makes 100% sense. If I can tell you as an amateur, meticulous plotter, the way that you put everything together really made it seem like you were a plotter. Like, I love that you're so humble about that rule thing, because I'm telling you, to me, it was earth shattering, because I'm a person that really admires brevity, and I really like a lot when you can use the absolute smallest amount of words to convey the biggest amount of thoughts. And the rules give such a layer of foreshadowing. I mean, imagine if somebody had no idea of our rules and they just started putting things together. It's like, oh, it's illegal to steal from the corporations, but not from XYZ. And you're just doing it's like, okay, wait a minute, that's how they're thinking. You know, it's like, as you said, everything about a society defines everything about a society. How they, what they care about how they treat death, how they communicate with one another, how they treat authority, how they educate the children, the symbols that they use. Everything that you said just really ties in, phenomenally. And even more so, I think the whole aspect that you brought up with religion, and I think that's something that I think Ja definitely has can kind of definitely throw a hat or two in there about, is religion and world building. I think is, again, if you want to talk about the sub things that are important in world building, I think that's top. Even if it's not something like you have like a formal religion, you know, religion is just a person's belief system, right? So like, however your character's belief in their world is, that's their religion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think for me, from your other question earlier, one of the big things that I think about is inner conflict for characters. I think that helps drive the story so much. Seeing what the characters want in the situation that they find themselves in, and whether or not they get that at the end. So when I'm writing, I consistently have, like, I'll take actually notes above my Word document, and it's like, this is what the character wants. And from there, I just write the rest of the chapter with that being in mind. Like, this is what the outcome they're looking for. This is what they're trying to achieve. And then we just sit there and we watch as the story unfolds, and all of their decisions are related back to that. So when I'm world building, a big part of my world building is the religion of the story. And the way that that religion influences the characters' desires and their wants, and then the conflicts that they deal with from a day-to-day decision-making like basis, and then how that influenced their family, which then influenced them further. So I look at world building as like, it starts with the religion and how it influenced them. And even as I'm writing book 2 right now, I'm looking at how this other character that's being introduced, this princess, and the religion and the way she perceives it from her family's background and their history within it, and how it's so much different than the other characters that you read in book 1. And then the way she decides to handle the situations that occur, it's all based off of that conflict that came from that initial starting point, which was the religion. And in general, I think that just drives the story. It keeps people waiting for the next page or the next chapter. I like to end either I end my chapters with either a revelation or a cliffhanger for the most part. There's really not many other ways I end chapters. You either get something that you've been waiting for, and then you're like, whoa, what was that? And then the chapter's over. Or you get something where you're like, I need to know what happened next. And I typically jump to another character, so then you have to read this other character.
Yes,
perspective.
I do 100% same thing.
So then you're like waiting for the next person, but you're getting an entirely different situation that occurs, picking up from another place. So I think that that's what keeps the tension in the story going, is as you're building, or as I'm building and writing, I just keep trying to create more opportunities for characters to make decisions. My characters all make their own choices, so they very much drive their endings. Like, they push their way to their end. And as a reader, it's almost easier to accept their end as their choice and as their mistakes, because they've made every choice along the way. When they were given options, they chose which path they would go down. And I think that it's all based off their inner conflict and which thing they feel compelled to do, similar to humans. So that's where my world building really comes into play, because the rest of it is just the world getting built around them, how society gets structured around them based off of, for me, it always goes back to the religion and who has the power in the society, and how their decisions shape the people underneath them. And yeah, then the conflict that occurs naturally as you try to fit within a box, and the box is a circle, and then you can't fit, and you have to figure out a way to smush yourself in or destroy the whole thing. And all the characters have to deal with that revelation at the end of their stories for me.
Oh my God, I love that. And it's something I was just talking about with somebody recently, that I have to learn to roll with the punches more when it comes to world building. About like 7 months ago, when I was in one of my, 3048 editing drafts, I was going through a chapter, and no, I was rewriting a chapter because I had just like didn't like it as much. I kind of went through a different route, and I'm rewriting this chapter, and I get to one point where, spoiler alert, the kids build a bomb, and they're kind of like, all right, like I get to this point, they're like, all right, the bomb's built. And as I'm writing, I realize, like, wait a minute, how are they going to transport this bomb? And I just realized at that point that me as the writer was like, oh, I went this far and didn't think about that. And I'm like getting mad at myself. It's like, no, I'm going to have to go and, delete this entire chapter, start over from scratch, and go through like a different route. But then I just realized right there, it's like, wait a minute, I can just transfer my bullshit to the characters. And then I literally wrote that as like the continuing line of one of the characters popping up being like, oh, how are we going to move this? And the person that came up with the plan being like, oh shit, how did I get this far? and not think about transportation. And then the plot and just went on from there. It was just like quick snap. It took me, I don't know where that idea came from, guardian angel, whatever you want to call it, Mother Earth, Gaia, my dog. But wherever I got the idea from, it saved me, because my solution prior to that was just delete everything prior and start from scratch. You know what I mean? Now on to the whole continuing with that whole like world building thing. While your first book, A Class of 95, is more kind of like based around your own life, as everything they as we talked about before, how do you feel? Well, kind of, can you give people the background and the world building and everything that you're doing with A Distinct Howl? Because not only are you just really have a good
dormant
mind.
howl?
What did I say?
Distinct.
Man, I had a dormant howl in my head. Where did I come distinct from? What am I doing? I swear, I was like a dormant howl. I'm ready for this. And of course. But yeah, because the world building that you do is something that I really value. I mean, like, you're the person, when I had problems with my world building, you were the person that we had our little conversation about.
Right.
And you helped me kind of like squash that out. So like, how do you, one, handle the, first to give a background of what a dormant howl is for the people unaware?
Well, a dormant howl basically is the anti-rejection story, where there's plenty of times while reading certain types of, I'm a romance, for some reason, romance is always I'm drawn to
romance
it.
Nut.
I'm a romance nut, which I never really thought I would ever be, but it's just something that no matter what, because with romance, it's such a broad spectrum of genre that you can basically dip your foot into anything, but it always comes back to the same thing. Romance. You have angst, you have drama, you have action, all built up into one particular genre. And A Dormant Howl is basically an anti-rejection story, to where this young girl will do just about anything to not be put into a situation that she cannot get herself out of. Because no matter what, if she has a mate or a significant other for an extended period of time, she no longer can have the life she wants for herself. So she goes over and beyond a way to keep herself from being matched with somebody else, because she thinks, I'm in a relationship with somebody, I'm never going to be able to do what I want to do. I won't be able to go to college. I won't be able to, settle myself when I want to. But it also plays into their particular society, their particular clan, their particular ways of living, is very patriarchal, very masculine, where the male rules the roost. Women are expected to be submissive and supportive of the man. And because they're mates, they're so connected that if one is away for a particular period of time, it kind of is a domino effect of reactions to life. She doesn't want that. So she basically, her father is Druid, her mother is Catholic and human, and which is completely taboo. There are rules for not being together with a human and producing children. And she was supposed to be human. She wasn't supposed to be given another, I guess, side of herself. So that's another part of the story. And it's another thing too. I have multiple points of view, but the world building is not only based upon what reality is with human beings, You have magic. I touch into Native American folklore. And it's not a stereotypical cliche werewolf story where it's alpha males and, you know, the feminine takes a back seat. Oh no, because she takes it upon herself. She suppresses the beast that she was given in order for her to live the life she wants to live until she's ready to have that other person in her life. And what she's told is something completely different. And in reality, she's basically killing herself and her second spirit when she does what she does, because she no longer lives in this world. So then I have to build a purgatory, which is something also I'm not familiar with, because you were asked the question about religion and how that takes a big part. Sometimes it's a character in itself. Well, luckily I have friends that are witches. I have friends that are pagan. I have friends, so I'm able to say to them, hey, I'm writing a story like this. Could you give me a little bit of background? She basically puts herself in a limbo situation where over time she's failing to exist. And she becomes more of a spectral being rather than a real being. And so I have to build on that. It's completely different than what I wrote before.
Yeah,
Completely.
that sounds like a lot of fun. That's like half the like cool thing about like world building, right? And even the question that like you don't know what you're doing. I mean, like who really knows what they're doing? You just make it. What is somebody gonna fact check to you about your version of purgatory? Hell no. And if they do, well, it's not your target audience, as Tara said, right?
Mm-hmm.
It
is quite fun because I'm basically building my own legends, folklore around what is, there. But I'm telling my version of it. So there's no, the cliche moon goddess is a real moon goddess from Celtic folklore. She's the mother of werewolves, but they're not werewolves. It's something completely different than what I'm, used to doing. And so far, people are interested in it. It's on Inked. So that's the great thing about being on those types of, you just put your stuff on there, Angel. So you kind of, have an idea of how it's going to start. People can automatically, and it doesn't have to be the final version. It's, you can put your first draft of things up on there before you take it down. And that's what I did with Class of 95. Class of 95 was basically the first version. And what I had published was a little bit, around the same kind of a thing, but it didn't really vary. But you can have multiple versions of one story on there. And when you do take it off to have it published, it could be a completely different type of a story. But at least people get a taste of what you're working on, and you can get advanced opinions of what you plan to publish. And that's the great thing about being on Inked, because right now A Dorm and a Howl is on there and people are liking it. So, because it's different.
That's awesome. Now, Adam, I'm glad that the trip was fine. You've landed, you're off the ship and you've landed now. So I'm glad the journey was successful. Going into the Cassidy Chronicles, one thing that you've talked about before is actually something that I really liked about your world building is that while there are in a kind of a near future, the characters, well, one character in particular has a fondness and kind of for the 80s pop culture. What did I get that right? Was it 80s pop culture?
It's the 20 years plus or minus the turn of the century.
Yes. Okay. And
So
kind of segueing, well, kind of within that logic, she really believes in the whole Star Trek future, right? It's the whole thing that like it's almost in the 1950s how I thought that everybody was gonna have a robot and flying cars, and you come here and it's not that at all. Well, I guess to a certain degree, right? It's like you have robots, you have Siri, but you know, it's not how you thought about it before. There's no R2D2 following you around. But she believes in that future still coming. So there's an interesting concept with the world building in that it almost calls on that idea, common trope of sci-fi, where it's like you build like a future and like you think it's gonna be XYZ, but it's not XYZ yet. But the characters themselves still believe in that idealistic future, you know?
and that's exactly it. And you know, so she's, and it's her, Kendra,
Mm.
the one looking at us. Oh, and back to Laura's point about the characters. You know, they keep telling you, okay, it's not done, it's not done, it's not done. Yeah, that's her. She has her own Instagram and Facebook accounts, and she puts up on the website as well her own posts telling the stories that I won't put in the books. So
He forgot to mention this.
basically, yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun.
So yeah, you know, I use her idealism, you know, is the kind of the realization of a dream, you know, for anybody. Okay, I have a chance to change the future. You know, she has been put in a position where she has the opportunity to influence and change the direction of the future, and she's taking advantage of that. So, you know, which has landed her in whole heaps of trouble, you know, because not everybody, in fact, very few people want to go along on the ride, at least initially. But yeah, she's pulling him along, kicking and screaming.
Huh.
Oh, and Tara, what you did with the prologue for your book, in my first book, realizing that I'm setting it in a, you know, 100 years from now, there's a, you know, North America 2013, things you ought to know. So I give a very brief history of North America from a century distant. So to a lesser degree, I did the same thing you did. You know, just okay. Here's an introduction. Here's the way the world looks right now. But in the fourth book, it's gotten to the point where the cast of characters and everything else, all the things I want to put in that I think people ought to know about. For example, you know, okay, this is how the warp drive works. This is the history of the time. Here are some descriptions of the spaceships. That would just be too, it would kill the plot. That's now an appendix. So just like you're doing with your prologue and your 40 rules, you know, that they can refer back to, I'm saying, okay, if you want to find out more, refer to the back end of the book. So
I made these for what you're talking about. So these are like blueprints for like the different things of the person and whatnot. Like I said, illustration is one of my biggest pitfalls, honestly. Way too much money into that, but my God, do I love it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, you're disappeared in the green screen there.
There it is.
There you go.
What was your feedback?
There you are.
Adam, what was your feedback from your readers on those editions? Did they feel like, did anyone tell you this was absolutely necessary for my understanding of the story? Or did you hear people saying it wasn't really necessary?
I haven't heard particularly that it wasn't necessary. Some of the ARC readers have said, "Oh, that was helpful." And the other thing I do is I will get people, as I'm talking to people, I'll say, hey, do you got a cool name? Can I borrow it? And so that's kind of where it came from. It originated because I had all these people who volunteered to be redshirted into the story. And I wanted to acknowledge them in some way, so even though their part may have flashed by, in a half a page, in the back of the book, they can say, oh, that's who he turned me into. Well, it's a pity I had to die.
Oh man, that is funny. Now, I want to segue into something that I think is going to be a really interesting conversation for this setup, and that's representation and point of views in writing, right? How do you feel about representation, one, but also writing a female voice as being a male, or writing a male voice being a woman? How do you tackle that? How do you feel about it? And also, I'm thinking of ending the podcast, just to give you like a little bit of what is for dessert. Ending on the podcast on that whole idea that we talked about before of kind of building a plot in between the group of us. So we'll try that out for the end. But what I'm thinking of for now, we can bounce around that the whole concept of representation. How do you tackle it? How do you feel about it? What are your thoughts?
Who wants to answer that first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I guess touching on being a female writer who writes in male perspectives. Age of the Elmec has 5 male character perspectives and 4 female character perspectives. I didn't really go into it, I'm going to be honest, and this probably is going to sound terrible, but I didn't really go into it with a lot of deep thoughts about how am I going to properly portray these male characters. I didn't even go into it initially with the intention of writing a male perspective. It kind of came in later drafts as more character POVs were added, but it was something that sort of came about organically and intuitively, and I created the characters the same way I created the female characters. And I didn't actually get feedback on them until beta readers. And my husband was a beta reader, and he was one of them. And people, just a couple of people would say like, wow, your male characters seem so realistic. Did you get help with this? Did you did your husband give you any advice on this? And I was just kind of like, no, I'm going to be honest. I've been around a lot of men in my life, and as a writer, I'm naturally very observant of people, and I just pick up on things of the people around me, of studying movies, characters in movies and TV shows. So I'm going to be honest and say I didn't do any research for these male characters. Maybe that's terrible, but I've gotten a lot of great feedback. But I think if I had gotten any feedback that was, ooh, you aren't being very considerate. You haven't really thought this through. You should have done your research by my beta readers, and I definitely would have held back on publishing and dug into that a little deeper. But I definitely think that's an easy one. I think writing in another gender is easy because we're often surrounded by people in the opposite gender. But I won't speak anymore on other character representations because I don't know, writing for people in the LGBT community or, people of other ethnicities. I don't really know or have very much to say on that because I don't have much experience there. But I think just being mindful of what you're writing is important.
I have to agree with Tara on this. I have a couple of different backgrounds, so I enjoy writing about mental illness. I enjoy writing about male perspective. I enjoy writing about different personality types and especially with different types of anxiety disorders, because I have experience with all of that. So when I write in a different voice, different gender voice, a different, I guess, sexual preference voice, it's because there's experience there, life experience that I have, and education wise. So for me, again, it's not hard, it's easy. Anytime that I've ever had anybody else read any of my, my material, everybody has their own preference and what they enjoy doing by having people read their stuff, whether it's beta readers, ARC readers, whatever. I don't particularly give my stuff out to anybody to read it, to give me feedback. I wait until I get my editor, and my editor is a more one-on-one type of a thing where they read it and say, hey, do you want to change this or that? So I don't give my stuff to anybody until I'm ready to give it to an editor, and then we hash it out together. That's just the way that I enjoy working. I'm also the type of person, I can't work on multiple things at one time. So luckily, I don't have a deadline to where I have to have pressure on myself to write, because unfortunately right now I'm in a writer's block. So it's not like I've been writing much of anything because I have nothing there. But when I do, and I do write in a male voice, anytime anybody's ever read it, same with you, they all kind of say, wow, that's really good. You didn't do any kind of research. You didn't go. I'm like, no, like I watch people. I'm a very good judge of character, sometimes to a fault. And there's certain personalities that I don't like that I love writing about because I get it out. So any kind of aggression, any kind of anger I had towards any kind of personality I don't like, that's my time to really get at people, especially with, I loved how we talked about before about character building and how people see certain characters that you create. I personally love it when people hate my characters. There's one particular character in Class of '95 that people wanted dead. And I was like, yes, I love that. But she's not dying.
I actually thought it was really genius how you handled that character, that like instead of killing her off, you actually kind of show her point of view, and maybe she's not as evil as she think. Well, I guess major spoiler alert there.
Well, there are certain issues that she has that go undiagnosed and untreated. She has, I guess, bipolar disorder. So, which comes with delusions, comes with paranoia, anxiety, and is the reason why she's the way she is. She's not just a normal run of the mill mean girl. There's reasons why she is the way she is, and I love writing characters that way. My first book has somebody who, again, is mentally unwell, who self-medicates with alcohol and narcotics because he doesn't like the way he feels on drugs, on medications for anxiety, for schizophrenia, for bipolar, and he has all of those disorders, but he doesn't want to be treated because it makes him feel like a zombie. So he does other drugs to self-medicate, which causes him to act out the way that he does. But yeah, those types of things are fun for me. I like it when people come to me and say, hey, I have a recommendation of how you can deal with this character. Oh yeah, how? Kill her. I'm like, no, that's not gonna happen. And I think I ended her. Oh, I didn't end her, but I think I ended her storyline because she will not be going into the sequel. So I think I ended her storyline appropriately because the ultimate thing she ever wanted was forgiveness. And the forgiveness that she received was the ultimate forgiveness. And she's better for it. She's now able to make peace with what she did in her life and how she affected people because of how she ended. But I have multiple, you were talking, Tara, about not writing about certain, groups of people because you don't have the experience. Class of 95, the most healthy relationship is a pansexual relationship that I have in the book, to where two don't work without the three. If one left, who's to say that the two people before the three were together would have lasted? They need the three of them together in order for them to be in a healthy relationship. And they're the healthiest relationship in the entire book. They're the ones that are longer with each other, the longest, without any huge problems, because they work well together. But will I venture off and do, like we were talking in the group, that I wanted to write a romance with a transgendered character. But I have that's a completely different, that's a horse of a different color. I don't think I can do that.
Why though? Humans are, that's my thought of this whole representation thing, is that humans are the same no matter what. Your preference of genitalia doesn't make you a good or a bad person.
And that's true for a lot of people. But you are, at the same time, you don't want to offend anybody.
Well, yeah, in today's world, you're gonna offend everybody though. Why,
I would say
if I make my book cover black and white, people are gonna go like, "Oh, where's the brown? Racist?" I'm like, all right.
I would say what I've experienced, at least, especially writing female characters and writing LGBT character, it's interesting. So I got my master's degree in counseling. So part of how I approach character is sort of just building humans first, and then writing through their lens of what would bother them, what has historically bothered them, and taking in account like the context. So I write medieval fantasy, and I write in a fantasy world where we created this religion, and this society is all based around our way of how the world and history would have been built. So part of how I write female characters isn't the same way you would write a contemporary novel set in our current society, because the female characters they didn't go through the same things, but they deal with similar issues. So I just look at their lens. First, I write them with their conflicts. I write them with their issues, and then I find ways to put it in the rest of the narrative. So some of my female characters, they'll get harassed by some male characters, but because a lot of them are warriors and fighters, they snap back pretty quickly. Not something that you'd always see in our society, but it's something that you can see potentially, especially if it was normalized. And I look at that. And with the LGBT couple I wrote, it's a gay king with his husband, and his big conflict is that he can't have an heir. So his father doesn't necessarily disagree with the fact that he's gay or anything like that, because that's not how the society was set up. The conflict is that he can't have an heir. So the entire story hinges on their relationship, which you get to see why they complement each other and why they're so close, and him dealing with whether or not he will have a child with his husband's sister ends up being the overall narrative, just to create the tension. And that's what you explore that story throughout the rest of his POV of seeing, like, are they gonna do that, and will this happen? And his father is pushing. His father pushes for it, and the entire time you're seeing how they're both reacting to it. But his father doesn't mind that he's gay, and that was the way that that's kind of the way the society set up in the story. And because of that, when I was writing the character, I was like, I can't write it as if they're suffering from the same levels of oppression and the same thing that someone in our modern day would, because that's not the historical context that they have. What they're dealing with is something entirely different, but still has the undertones of that I'm being forced to do something to accommodate the way you all see the world and the way you all perceive the world.
It's more self-imposed
Yeah,
on them.
That's pretty genius, guy, honestly.
And that's in one of the readers, or this YouTube guy, he reviewed the book, and when I was talking to him about it beforehand, and he had let me know, he was like, that was one of the things that was the most striking part of the book. It was the fact that you were able to implement this character, have this conversation without never ever needing to really explicitly talk about them being a gay couple. So I think the same thing.
Which actually, in a lot of situations, it's a good thing because it's kind of secondary.
Yes.
You're primarily saying, yes, they're human beings, but their sexuality does not define them.
Yeah, and then I have another character who is trans, but she's trapped in a female body. So when writing her POV, it's really her wanting to do more of, or leaning more towards what the rest of the males around her are doing, but also not feeling accepted by them or the other group that's trying to pull her in. So it's this identity crisis piece of trying to find who you are and being comfortable with who you are, but not also being accepted, and then dealing with a body that you don't believe appropriately fits who you are. So those are the ideas I would explore, because those are the things I kind of know would be the general experience.
Yeah. It's just, and personally, it's just something that I have to kind of think about. You can't help but be sensitive to certain things personally, I'm just afraid that those things, sensitivity wise, within myself, will be misconstrued and read into when I write about it. It's in here, that I have to get over. I just thought, it would be a great story because, number one, it's not really written about. And if it is, the audience is a certain type of audience, and you want to make it so it's available to everybody, So I'm not sure if it's going to be written. And if I do it, I'm not sure how it would be received. So, and that's what's holding me back from writing.
Yeah, if honestly, I agree with both yours and Tara's points about it. The reason I bring it up is I guess it's given me like a lot of anxiety myself, where today there's a huge push. Well, I can't say like a huge push, but more so than I was aware to 10 years before. There's been like a huge increase in like that type of representation, LGBTQ, and getting all these type of things in there, which I think is phenomenal. But it's getting to the point that it's, I guess, kind of made me look into myself, and it's been like, oh, wait a minute, like my works don't have that much representation, and am I ignorant? And it's just like, oh, I mean, I don't think so. But you know what I mean? Like, I don't have any hate in my heart, but it's just like, it's like one of those things that I guess if you were to like critique it, it's like, but I guess I don't have that representation. And it's one of those things that I have the same type of thoughts, like, oh, I wonder if I should just rewrite a character and throw that in there. But then I feel like like it's kind of like, well, it's not going to change the character. As we said, it does nothing for the character. You just you just throw it in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm being ignorant. I don't know.
Your characters are who they are. I mean, they define themselves. And the longer you write with them, the more they define themselves. The first book, the first scene, the first chapter is their wedding, and they're part of a triad. The wedding doesn't go off because somebody tries to shoot Cass, but that's neither here nor there. It had nothing to do with who she was marrying. It had everything to do with what she had invented. And all through all of the books, I'll mention very briefly once, what each character looks like, and that's it. And I'll drop in things. One character who's turned into kind of a major secondary character, it very casually mentions, that her two husbands were killed in this one particular battle. Just mentions it, and that's it. It's not a big deal. It's not fussed over. It's not, ooh, how unusual. Another character in the fourth book, trying to remember where she is, she's invited up to the starship, and she says, well, can my wife and my husbands come up? It's a plural marriage. There are straight couples, there are gay couples, there are pan couples, there are triads, there are group marriages, line marriages. I mean, it is, they are who they are. They love who they love. They are with who they're with. And, their skin color is what their skin color is. Their genitalia is what it is. I have one non-binary character in there who I'm very careful. I make sure that their pronouns are used properly, which threw off my narrator when she was reading it the first time, because she said, oh, this doesn't sound right. No, it's correct.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that approach.
So it is, they are who they are, and they're going to be who they're going to be. It's their actions who define that define them. What they do with who they are defines the character. My main antagonist, Laura, just like yours in Class of '95, she's one of those that people would happily run over with a car and then back up to make sure they got her.
Yeah. Burn her body, chop her head off. You make sure she never comes back. Yep.
Yeah. But it has absolutely nothing to do with any outside, any relational traits, any gender preferences. It has absolutely nothing to do with that. It's just, that's who she is. She's power hungry, and she refuses to let she refuses to back down from any perceived threat. And she makes bad decisions and goes overboard, which kind of spirals.
So did you have to do, a bunch of research, or do you know people through, that you could kind of communicate with and get their experience to write those characters? Just curious, either of you. Well, I know Laura, you mentioned you did, but Adam, did you, or did these characters just come about intuitively and you just went with it?
I think I wrote it. I'm in the same boat you are, Tara. I'm a pantser. So, I wrote.
You pants people?
Yes.
Yes, he runs down. He pulls them down and then runs away.
I wrote. So.
Oh, that sounded wrong. Actually, I meant ding dong ditcher. We'll leave it there.
So I wrote the characters, and I wrote them based on what I knew and interactions I had had with various people in my life. So drawing upon all of them, not specifically and not consciously, not saying, oh, that's a good characteristic from so and so, I'm going to put that into this one. I wrote them, and they've been received well as well. I mean, Cass and Ken, if you can get through the first book without wanting them to be your best friends, you're probably not the right audience. That
Mhm.
they were written to be very likable and very engaging. So
Well, that's
Yeah.
why anybody that's been, reading my book, anybody that has been reading it, they all, for some reason, just gravitate towards David, Connie, and Chris. That's the triad in the book. And they're all like, because I'm also planning to write a spin-off of just them and their journey and how they wound up together. And I'm looking forward to doing that kind of, because at first David just thought he was gay, and he spent his whole life throughout high school thinking that's what he was. But it wasn't until he had an experience in college to where he's like, maybe I'm not just, into guys. Maybe there is a part of me that needs a female in my life. And same thing, goes on with Connie and Chris. I'm a pantser too, so it's not like I'm planning this all out. It's just kind of like by the seat of my pants, what I've, experienced with people around me, that thought of themselves in one way, and now they're, completely different. I mean, I have a friend that was married to a man for a number of years, she has two beautiful children, and now she has a wife.
mhm.
It is what it is. But it just goes to show you, though, what you might have expected from your life isn't necessarily what
Your life
it
is going
ends
to
up
deliver.
being. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like Adam said, they're people at first, and everything else around them is just whatever else is there. And they love who they love, they're married to who they're married to, and that is all that they need. A dormant howl. Oh, Tara's gone. A dormant howl.
Probably reconnect in a minute.
They she has two mates. It just is what it is. But there's reasons behind it, and it just goes into something else, that it's not a triad anymore. There's four involved, but that is talked about later on.
Yeah.
Why there's four.
And I have to say as well, getting back to Tara's question, in terms of research, a lot of it is probably from not just from real life, but from reading what other authors have written who have done it well, or who have explored it, and poked holes in the negative stereotypes.
Yeah.
Spider Robinson is fantastic in terms of writing about just loving who you love. It doesn't matter any of that with all of the Lady Sally books and the Callahan's books. And Robert Heinlein actually poked a lot of holes in those negative stereotypes in his later writings. I mean, you look at starting with Stranger in a Strange Land, and then Moon is a Harsh Mistress, I Will Fear No Evil, Time Enough for Love. I mean, from 1960 on, his adult books were just kind of, again, you love who you love, and if the world doesn't like it, well, the world can go hang.
I have to admit, I relate a little bit to AR with this, because there is no LGBTQ representation in Age of Valmek. And actually in the 40 laws, their marriages are very strict. And one of the laws is that same-sex merging is not allowed. So I have a little bit of, I think, insecurity about that, because I wouldn't ever want anyone to think that just because I've written this world means I'm exclusive or I'm, anti-supportive of those communities, because that is so not who I am. The laws kind of reflect their society, but also creates great conflict for down the road in the book and in the series. So it's there for a reason. Whether it's evident in the first book or not, it will be. But yeah, there is this, feeling of maybe lacking, like I should be making a point to include these things because I'm an inclusive person, and where the world is today, it's very important, right? But again, going back to what you said, Adam, characters are who they are and the worlds are the way they are. So right now, this world, it's just simply not allowing those things, but maybe if it changes, if it evolves, those things will be there. But I also don't want to feel pressured or forced to write things that I don't know enough about, that I don't have experience with. So for me right now, it is the way it is, also because I just don't have that confidence to write about those things. And in the future, I'd love to. And I think I just have to learn more. I think that's what it is. I just don't know enough. So I think I
agree
beat
with
myself
you.
up a bit because
No,
I
no,
don't,
no.
but
Yeah, I think
and that's another thing. I'm so sorry. Can I just say one thing?
go ahead.
Tara?
yeah.
That's one thing that I praise you on, that you are able to admit the fact that it is something that you're self-conscious about. You're aware that you know that there are reasons why you don't want to include without excluding. And I'm proud of you for saying that in this group, especially when each one of us has those elements within our stories. I have an issue where I don't necessarily have the self-consciousness to do it. I just have the feeling of having a standalone book where my main characters are two characters that I have a sensitivity to approach it the right way. And don't feel the pressure. Don't let anybody pressure you into having characters that are what are considered, still to this day, I'm going to say a terrible word, taboo. Because in a way it is, according to society that we live in now. And maybe it's easier because it is, if it's a fantasy, it's not set in reality. So you can build your fantasy world in however kind of a society you want. My Adornment Howl has those rules too. They're very patriarchal, very masculine based, and they don't allow human and lichen to be together. They don't approve of same-sex coupling. And because they have a revolution, a revolt that takes years of planning, they want the I guess the modern people, the children of the elders of the clan, they want a more progressive society, more inclusive. They want same-sex matings. They want human lichen matings, because why mate me with the same sex if I'm not, if the moon goddess directs who I'm supposed to be paired with? Why is it wrong then? Why are you making it wrong if the goddess is telling me my other half is the same gender as me? Then what makes it wrong? Why are you're going against the moon goddess's choices? That's not right. So we want to just follow what the moon goddess wants us to follow. And you're telling us that it's wrong. Who's right and who's wrong then?
And to kind of come into defense before I let Jah take it over, I think it works really well in your case, Tower, because if we're talking about a population of 4,000, right now we're at approaching 8 billion. Obviously, and that brings in the point of what Jah was talking about with his book, for as not wrong as it is, there is no procreation in same-sex marriages. So when we're talking about a society that needs to rebuild, that's, I don't think love is something that you can really consider there anymore. That's something that's like, no, we need to make kids. We need to, doubling up our numbers. That's what's going to make us survive as a society. So I think in your thing, it really, I mean,
That makes sense.
it makes a lot of sense. It's not even a
Yeah.
thing about being inclusive or not being inclusive.
Right.
No,
right.
it is. And the reproduction in the novel is so much. It's a huge aspect of the novel. There's something called birthing ceremonies, and people
I
are
remember that.
arranged
Really
with
cool
their
aspect.
merge partner and all that jazz. So it's a whole thing. It's yeah, you're right. It's definitely just a part of that world, reproducing and
Yeah. So
repopulating.
so for you in your storyline, that kind of relationship doesn't necessarily make any sense, because you're trying to rebuild a society. You can't if it's a woman and a woman,
Mhm.
and what you do later on is up to you and how you want to take your story. But again, don't feel pressure into, being more inclusive, because at the end of the day, still though, it's your story. You're telling it.
Mhm.
You're the author.
Yeah, good points.
Author Tara Lake. Now, Jahmil, what you were about to go into something. What was it?
Sorry, I cut you off. I didn't
No. This is a free conversation.
Yeah, no worries. What I was gonna say was that I think the approach to LGBT inclusion into writing, I think it's hard for people to always to recognize how to do it in a nuanced way. Because for me, I think about it in nuance. I think if you have a society like the one you created, there's always going to be characters that fall in love. Despite what the societal rules might be, you are, as human at least, attracted to who you're attracted to. So you immediately can have conflict within your story of a character that falls in love with someone else who they're not necessarily supposed to. And it might go against what society wants, but it creates an immediate B plot, in my opinion, that allows one of these characters to have whatever might be their outcome. And it's interesting to explore. So I would challenge to just explore the idea versus even trying to be inclusive in the traditional fashion. Because even when I created this character as a gay king, it was let's explore the idea. It was one of our ideas that we came up with for what this society could be like. What happens if you have a king that's supposed to select an heir but doesn't have an heir? And from there, we created the idea of, let's have these kings be gay. And then that was the catalyst to include a gay character that then has this whole story arc, and people fell in love with him.
But do you realize in history, all throughout realistic history, not just fantasy and literature, there have been gay rulers.
Yes.
But nobody ever talks about it until long after they're dead.
Yes, because it's not accepted. But that would be my challenge for a writer, right? It's you have the characters that cannot be accepted, and we're writing from their perspectives. So if you're writing from their perspectives, you get to write that character that isn't accepted, that is gay, that exists. And it could just be any character that makes sense for that person or that character, with their beliefs and their morality and however they feel about society, how much they're willing to push against the traditional expectation. So that's the way I've at least approached all of these topics with writing different characters or characters outside of the stereotypical norm, is just to challenge the narrative. I look at what's going to drive the most conflict, what's going to make a good B plot, what's going to make a good C plot. And sometimes having a character that has this thing that goes against the norm of society just creates more intriguing perspective. And I think that's what people appreciate more than anything else.
Yes.
Is just having that piece involved versus having that piece on display. Because I'm a straight male. And I can't necessarily say I have the experience of someone who's LGBT, but I can say I know people who are LGBT, some of the issues that they faced, and I know how that plays a role in our society or any society. Humans. So you see, like, immediately why that being included in the story can make a difference, because I could have made the king just unable to have children. Instead, it was just something entirely different.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's something that I had spoken about in like with people in the past.
Jesse to come over.
I'm sorry, it's my kid.
Yeah, no problem.
He broke into the room.
No, it's fine. Well, I'm.
Jesse.
Hey.
Say hi.
Hey,
Say hi.
How you doing?
Hi, guy.
Now
Go ahead. I'll talk to you later.
It's an interesting
Okay, Daddy doing Jesse.
I know. Go ahead. Go. Bye. Sorry.
No problem. It's an interesting concept because some of my favorite characters that like as far as like representation goes, there is a show on Netflix. It's a Spanish show. It's not really very known in like people that I talk to. It's called Money Heist. It's called Casa de Papel in Spanish. It's on Netflix. A great English dub if people are interested into it. And they have a couple of different sexualities. They have a really good like representation all throughout. And my favorite thing about that representation is that it really does not define the character by any degree. Like all it does is like instead of like them being in love with a girl, they're in love with a boy, or if they're transsexual and all these different type of stories. But for the most part, it's great. And then they even wrote kind of a character that's kind of like ignorant but like lovable, because like his cousin is transsexual and gets him off the bus expecting to see his cousin that they played soccer with all growing up, and he comes out like this beautiful looking girl. And it's not that he is like shocked like in a bad way, he's just shocked like, oh shit, you have like tits now, oh my god. And he's just like and he like, and again he's like very much not like the most eloquent person. So immediately his first thing is going like, oh dude, you're a girl now, oh shit. And like obviously she gets she gets all offended. It's like, oh, but I was always a girl. And he goes like, hey, I'm not saying all that, it's just you're beautiful, like I'm sorry, it's just you went from being a cousin of mine playing soccer and shit, now I gotta like beat off people when we go to bars. It's just a different, I'm sorry, I'm not like I don't feel bad or anything like that.
It's just taking time to shift gears.
Yeah, exactly. Bill
It
Burr,
was a surprise.
Yeah, Bill Burr said a great joke that he was talking about like the whole Caitlyn Jenner thing, and he was talking about that it was just like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it, but I don't understand why like we're being attacked for being shocked. Like he was saying that like people just expected like it's like you're having a conversation with them, and like he's there, it's like Olympian Bruce Jenner. And then he gets up, leaves, come back as Caitlyn Jenner, and like his thing is that like you just like start off the conversation. Oh, so like I was saying, Caitlyn.
And the funny thing about that whole situation is that it's like all of a sudden it's like, did he do it just for ratings? But at the end, it was shocking because it's like 1 minute he's Bruce Jenner, the next minute he's in heels.
Yeah.
But why put yourself through that whole process? Because changing your gender is not easy. It's not just putting on a dress. Why go through all of that if it's just for attention? You don't do it for that purpose.
Well, if I could be honest, I wasn't even really thinking about that. It's just more kind of like all right, like Bill Burr's joke about it was, if I left and came back with a beard, that'd be a conversation. It's like, oh, dude, you just got a beard. Now you're supposed to leave, come back, different gender, and it's not even a thing that we can just sit about it for a second. It's just immediate, just like, oh, brave and gorgeous. We can't even have a conversation about it. Nobody is throwing hatred out. Well, I can't say nobody hates anybody, but like, you're not getting that from me. I have no hate in my heart. You know what I mean? So, but again, I guess it kind of brings up the whole thing that Tara was bringing about. It just brings a lot of anxiety because it's like at the same time, like that's not in your heart.
Right.
But just I guess by people misreading, especially with how overly PC we are nowadays, people can misread and dig too deep into a subject, and now you're the asshole, and you're sitting back talking about like I thought we were all friends here.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where the target audience comes in though, right? Somebody who's
Exactly.
going to take offense to the world that I've created is just simply not the targeted audience.
Right,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah. No, I had somebody who did a review of one of the audiobook versions and gave it 3 stars. They liked the story, liked the they liked the narration, but I've got LGBTQ characters, and
Surprise shock.
yeah, and that was her reason for giving it 3 stars instead of 4 or 5.
Wait. That was her reason, just because you had that. Okay.
Yeah, and she said, those aren't characters that I like. I like, I like them individually. I don't like that. I don't like
You
the
don't like
idea
them
of them
together.
together. Right.
Yeah.
I was like, oh well, okay, thanks.
Then it's not for you, but thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some fuck shit right there, man.
Uh,
Honestly. What the hell is that? What? You don't like the character because what? That's insane. So
there are
if you
people like that.
if
There
you
are
just
people like
omitted that from the story, it would have been a 5 star, is what you're telling me. Literally, if you just took those lines where they're kissing or they're having the wedding and you just take like a black mark, they would have no problems.
No,
Right, but
it
it
would have
would-
been fine if it was a man and a woman.
I'm telling you, these
right,
people
but it
are
wouldn't have
crazy.
been the same story either.
Yeah.
It would not be these 2 characters.
Yeah.
You don't think so?
No,
How not?
because it is who they are. As I write more in the series, I get more into the backstory, and Kendra's posts, and she's talking about, they grew up together. They were childhood friends, and that's alluded to in the books, but they've always been. She said just the other day, they've always been each other's better half.
And
They've
now,
always been the best part of each other, from the time they were, babies. So they don't know any other way. They don't know how not to be who they
Together.
are.
Yeah.
Right.
I understand that aspect of it, but don't you think that that energy would be equal if it was between a man or a woman, or 2 dogs or 2 fish? I mean, love is love, isn't it not? I thought that was the whole point. We just kind of like cleared up. It's all humans. Genitalia is just
what are you trying to do here?
Okay.
I'm not trying to anything.
What Adam's trying
I
to say
get
is if
his
you
point.
change the if you made one of those female characters all of a sudden male, it would be a whole different story. I think that's what Adam's trying to say. I don't think he's trying to say that 2 women can love each other more than a man and a woman. I think he's just saying for his particular story, it would just change everything.
It would change.
Right?
It would change the trajectory of his plot. It would be a completely different telling.
Yeah.
Right. If this was Kenneth instead of Kendra, it would be a different plot, because
Mhm.
You'd be writing a completely different story, completely different personalities in their character.
yeah, I mean, she does things which are totally outside of what we consider gender norms. Okay. She left home at 18 to become an actress and ended up getting recruited and became an assassin. That was her job, to go out and kill people. That is not a gender norm. But if that was Kenneth, then it falls into, okay, he's been recruited to be James Bond kind of thing. So
I guess it depends on your point of view, because I immediately thought of Black Widow when you said that thing. I was like, yeah, okay, I've seen it. It's a thing I've heard before.
right, but Black Widow stands out, and all the other ones, Evelyn Salt and Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they all stand out because they aren't the gender norm.
Yeah, they're not who you would paint as feminine and female. They're not automatically getting a husband, having 5 children and being domestic. They're going out and they're doing things that what you would see a male superhero or someone with a set of balls would do, not what a woman with a figurative set of balls would do.
Right, and it works the same way for Cass. And it works the same way for Cass, because Kendra says it all the time. She's the brains of the operation. She's the genius. She's the one who has the degrees in optical engineering and quantum mechanics. Again,
You can't move a head without a neck.
so she, again, it's less of a non-gender norm. There are plenty of smart women, and they are more and more visible, but it's still unusual enough that if I changed Ayana into somebody else, it would take away from who she is. It would make her less of who she is.
Have any of you watched the TV series Schitt's Creek?
Yes.
Okay. So there's I don't want to give away any spoilers, but two of the characters in there that are a gay relationship.
Great
They
character.
yeah, if you just think about, what if you took one of them away and you replaced one of them with someone different? It would be a totally different story, and you wouldn't get the same feels. But for those two characters and their cute little romance, I get the same feels as I do watching Jamie and Claire on Outlander.
Because it doesn't matter to you.
It doesn't matter, but it's just, the point of, if you were to replace one of those characters, it just wouldn't be the same.
And that goes back to
that kind of helped me understand a lot, honestly.
And that goes back to what we were talking about, an hour plus ago about romance. I think it was Laura, you were talking about romance. The thing about romance, and I've come to appreciate it in some, a lot of the books I've been listening to and reading lately as well, is because it actually gets into exploring the relationship between people. And when you get down to it, in my opinion, fiction is about exploring the relationships between people. Now, romance puts it front and center. Romance,
that's the ugly, everything.
Yeah, yep. That's the spotlight. But every book is about the relationship between people, in the society that has been created, whether that's a post-apocalyptic, 4,000 survivors, or a fantasy, a high fantasy with ghost kings.
Imposter kings.
Imposter king, sorry, imposter king. Or non-werewolf werewolves.
Yeah.
But it's about the relationships going on between those characters. And if you change something about one of the characters, you change the relationships.
Yeah, like in A Dormant Howl, there's going to be an aspect of the relationships that change, and one is going to be added. And my editor is saying to me, well, how would you feel about, if one dies, or what if you can't get the main character back into the story, back into her, not giving it away, back into her body, because she has no body anymore. What's going to happen? And I said, well, there are ways that we can write the magical aspect into it. But no, I can't see how the story is going to end the way that I want it to end if one of them completely disappears. Because what happened to one of the females should have never happened to her. And what happened to one of the other females, it should have never happened. They both should have never disappeared from Earth in the first place. Without giving too much away, they both shouldn't have died. They both should have never gone where they went. And for them to disappear, one of them to disappear, it just wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work. So yeah, romance has all of that all together. And that's the constant push and pull of writing a story like that. I know how I want it to end, and I just don't see one of them disappearing and it working, So
My God, this is why I love these conversations. Now, like, you just changed my point of view on that. It's gonna help my writing in the future. Telling you.
you did?
Yeah,
Okay,
my
go.
my hands were dirty.
Okay, go ahead. Bye.
But I want you to come out.
I will. I'll be right there. Bye. Sorry.
No problem at all. So
His hands are clean.
Yay!
Okay, great.
Yay!
Victory!
The plot has been thickening this entire time. People have been waiting for that answer,
He
Finally gave the
washed
big
his
reveal.
hands.
That was the
He
red wedding,
washed-
actually, right there.
Yeah. My son, you never know.
Now that kind of leads me into like a question I want to ask. What do you feel? Yeah, I guess it's a two-parter for everyone. What do you feel is your favorite one character you've created, and what is your favorite character in Mythos, just ever and everness? Now, special credit if you can kind of like tie in some that it's kind of like you just recently watched. Like for me, I just watched Dazed and Confused yesterday, and I mean I'm up and down with that movie. Jesus.
Well,
Just,
so is that movie. It's up and down.
Oh, let's not get into that battle.
Uppers, downers, yeah.
In-betweeners. Oh my God, no, yeah, that aspect of it. I mean, the first 4 minutes, it's the picture of Abraham Lincoln that they like painted into the school, and people like graffitied it to make his eyes look red. And he's like
It's
smoking
like,
a joint. I'm telling you, that
dude.
movie's hilarious. You ever look at the dollar bill, man? Think about it. I'm telling you, that movie is just phenomenal.
Stop.
So turn
It's
that.
old. I mean, what are you doing watching Dazed and Confused? How you're a baby.
I like, that's a classic movie. That's a criterion. And if it's
Classic.
not, whatever, it should be a criterion. I'm not that well-read, but it's a really good movie, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, it has Ben Affleck when he was. Oh, you talk about baby. That's baby Ben Affleck, and
Oh my God.
Matthew McConaughey's
Not
first
a hate-
movie.
oh.
First time he ever says, "All right."
All right.
I'm
Yeah.
telling you, that's like classic. But turning that onto everybody else, what is something that kind of makes you pop up as a really great examples of character building and just like, I guess in a sense, world building, as like we talked about before, it all ties together?
Oh.
Ding, 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 ding.
I'll just. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was going to stall for time because asking to choose one of my characters to be my favorite, it's, okay, which toe do you lose? Yeah.
Pinky.
Not your big toe. You need that the
Yeah,
most.
no problem. Pinky.
Your big toe sets your pace for the rest of your life. No, not the big toe.
Yeah, definitely can't be that one.
We have to pick one of our own favorite characters, or just a character.
Anything. Like a great example of Mythos, a character that you wrote, just like some that.
Oh no, you asked a two-part question. One was a character we wrote, and one was from Mythos.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
So while one is kind of like marinating, you can answer the other.
Oh, good. Yeah, because none of us have ever read hundreds of books and watched thousands of hours of television and movies, and all right, I'll throw a character out there from Mythos, as it were. How about I'll throw out there Benjamin Sisko from Deep Space Nine.
I'm not familiar. Could you?
Okay, so Ben Sisko he is introduced as a lieutenant who loses his wife during the Battle of Wolf 359 to the Borg. And then several years later, he is given the command of Deep Space Nine, which is this rickety old base, this space station that's been abandoned by the Cardassians after their war with Bajor. And in the first episode, he's told by these, that they're referred to as the wormhole aliens, that, oh, by the way, you're the emissary. So you're basically like the prophet to the Bajorans. And for the next 7 seasons, you just watch him more or less, he's trying to deal with this and deal with the they develop his character over 7 years, accepting this and accepting all the various new roles and all the things that he has to do in order to protect, to fulfill his mission as he sees it, without straying from the core values that made the character at the beginning. He's, so there's one. I'll come back to the second one.
I do like that a lot. And just also kind of like to re-detail the question. It doesn't have to be like a favorite character, just a character that it's impactful to you.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's not so much that he's a favorite character, but it's a study in character development.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant the question as. Like, what is something that you, when you're doing your own writing, you kind of refer to as like, all right, now if I can get to this point, that'd be a nice little goal.
I love Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones.
Hell yeah.
He was just all along the way one of my favorite characters. I just loved how it was, one season you were so annoyed with him because he was such an ass. And then, he had just had his moments, and he slowly kind of turned around and became this great person, and all along the way, he was always the smartest person in the room. He always knew people best. And I think that's what I liked about him so much, is even though whether he was in a drunken moment of not giving a fuck, or he was, up there helping out, he always kind of knew the most. And even though he was at such a disadvantage too, he was always shunned in his family for being a midget or being a smaller person.
Yes, but he survived.
Yes. Without giving spoilers to anyone who hasn't seen it, I was very happy come the end, just where he ended up, because I was like,
yes, of all of them, the runt, the one that had the most shit thrown at him, he survived. I agree with Tara. I have a favorite, but
and not to mention,
speaking as the one person who hasn't seen it, I don't have any plans to see it, so don't worry about spoilers. I mean, I figure at this point it's been out there for 10 years and I've missed it all, so I'm not,
you're not missing much. You're not missing much, Adam.
My interest is never.
You're missing it all.
Yeah, my interest has never gotten enough in the past 10 years to seek it out. It's probably not going to get any. My interest isn't going to be increased.
It's not going to change any either.
I hear you. Yeah. I'm with that with Lord of the Rings. I know people are going to send a whole bunch of hate mail. What do you want? It's been too long.
Oh, don't even get my husband is a traditionalist in every sense of the word. So yeah, he's all about the Lord of the Rings and Marvel and everything, and he gets ticked off when things are changed and out of canon on Star Wars. I'm like, dude, it's a movie.
Yeah, I guess defending him, canon is really important. It's like, if you're, especially as the writers, right? I mean, they wrote their world. How can you not forget your own world? That's insane. Then again, I guess that's what's annoying about canon, because it goes between writers.
It's
and
just
then,
I don't. Then
weird
I don't.
Conversation, I guess.
Whatever. I did. It's so over my head. That's why I don't think I would ever be able to write sci-fi, because you have to think too much. And
well, there's a lot of lore and dormant Howl.
It's more fantasy. It's not, it's not sci-fi. It's magic. It's it's elemental. It's
sci-fi is magic with some notes scribbled in. That's all sci-fi is. If you try to explain the idea of electricity to people 1,000 years ago, they'd be like, all right, witch.
That's true, though. That's very true.
Arthur Clarke, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah.
It's true.
Now, Laurie, you also said that outside of Tyrion, you had kind of a character in mind. Would you mind elaborating?
Yeah. I loved. My favorite is Anne Rice. She's my go-to when it comes to certain fantasy genre. But of all of her series, I love the witch books that she did. And if I had to choose the one character from that book series, it would be Rowan. Ronan was I mean, because she, no matter how much she wanted out of the family, out of their legacy, she was always drawn back in. And she didn't want to be, and she went over and beyond trying to keep herself it from being in that family and being a part of a legacy that would basically birth the Antichrist. Yeah, it's a whole series of books, the witching hour, and at the end of it, it basically she gives birth to the devil. Yeah, it's it's great story. It's a great book.
Story.
Oh yeah, giving birth to a 7-foot cut, built, beautiful monster that grows exponentially throughout the whole entire book within days. By the time he's 4 days old, he's a grown man.
Oh, you gotta love a happy ending, huh?
Mhm.
Now, Ja, onto that note, I saw your kind of like your face kind of like waiting. Do you have a character in mind?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yes.
I think the one that jumps out to me the most in recent memory is Thanos. I love Thanos as a character. Thanos.
Yep.
I actually watched a lot of videos on how you break down the psychology of Thanos. Because Thanos as a character comes in, has a mission. I think his certainty is something that I really want to write into a character. Someone that is certainly right. Like you could not be wrong by any means.
Yeah.
It's just it's so powerful. And the fact that he gives credit to people. He's like, oh, this is thank you, like trying to fight him. He'll give you credit for trying to fight him. Trying to stand up. He loves confidence.
He's giving you praises. He's knocking you down.
Oh yeah, he loves the truth. I'm like, Thanos is literally he's like a hero of his own story.
Yeah.
And the whole time he's his own hero, but he's so
as he destroys the world.
So strong in his conviction. And then he has to obviously kill Gamora. And he's sad. And in that moment, I felt sad for Thanos because it was one thing he loved. I was like, he just went through the whole character progression all the way to when he accomplished his goal at the very end and sits back and doesn't cheer or hurrah. He just sits down and watches the sun.
Mona Lisa smile. That's what he has.
How many? Wait a second. What's the stages of grief? How many are there? He goes through it all at once. 7 stages of grief.
I thought it was 5. Actually, I don't know.
No, and the best part about Thanos as a character is that when it came down to it, he believed wholeheartedly that he was the only one in the world, in the galaxy, that was willing to do what was necessary.
Yeah.
And that piece of him was just like, I need a character in my own book that is so dead set.
Delusional.
They are the only one in the world that is right.
That lives in their own world.
Yeah,
he only made one mistake. You know, he only made one mistake. The mistake was he didn't wipe out the memory of the 50% that were gone.
Mm.
If he had done that,
son, preach. Okay.
If he had done that,
okay,
and the 50% are gone, and nobody remembers that they ever existed, and there's no proof that they ever existed,
they wouldn't have come back.
There wouldn't have been
anything to miss.
Trying,
yeah,
to get them back.
That's why Endgame, he was like, now I have to wipe all of you out and just
make a universe,
and just start over from the beginning. A society and a world that only knows one thing.
I think I found my new favorite.
Like
Thank
Thanos. Thanos is a whole other level of character.
My God. If I can be honest,
found my new favorite.
My wife has a t-shirt that I had made for her that said Thanos was right.
Oh my God. Yeah. Talking about that. I mean, I have my character Zako is like that. And if I can be honest, he's one of my characters that I like a lot just because it's like he's just so convicted to his solutions that like is a problem that he created. It's like, and he literally doesn't see it until like the last breath that he takes. And it's just like you gotta like I love that concept. But going back to Thanos, my favorite line in almost ever is when homie looks at Iron Man and he goes just like, I hope they remember you. There is something so powerful about that line. It's like, yeah, you know what? I hope they remember you. You did all right, kid. Just like,
and they do, and they do remember him.
Are you in your ability, my dude? I hope they remember you. Imagine that, like you're going to war with somebody, France versus England, and they're like, oh, you know what? You're cute. I hope they remember you, kid.
Hope they remember you.
Like that's not happening. Like no one has that much about like amount of power. If you want to go to war with somebody, you hate your other side. But he views it almost like Jesus. Like they know now what they do. It's like, it was cute, kid. Hope they remember you.
Nice try.
Exactly.
Nice
like,
try.
Cute kid. Now we've already kind of gone over, so I'm gonna leave it up to you guys. Do you want to end it here, or do you want to experiment a little bit with this writing prompt thing?
Well, I'm gonna have to go because I'm expecting company.
More than fair. We went way over the time anyway.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. It's been real, guys. Thank you.
Stay for the outro so you can, all of that.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
again, this is the end of the podcast. I'm AR. We have Adam, Jahmil, Tara, and Laurie. I just did that with a semicircle right there. And we're going to do the reverse order, I guess, for, the outros. Where can people find you, the people listening, websites, book coming out, anything you want to promote? This is the time to do it.
Laurie writes stories, laurieoknowsky.com. Class of 95 is out, working on my second one, and see ya.
See you. Tara?
Tara A. Lake on Instagram, taraalake.com. Age of the Elmech is my debut novel. It's out, and it's a part of the series, and I'm working on book 2 in the Elmech series right now.
Ja?
Got you. You can find me at Inspired by Jahmil on Instagram, inspiredbyjahmil.com if you want to check the website out. I have a podcast, the Books by Authors podcast. I'm hoping to have everybody on this podcast. Definitely. On my other podcast, getting one-on-one interviews for sure. You'll get some information about that. You can also find me on Facebook, Jahmil Effend, author, and catch the book War in the Fallows, out right now in paperback form and on ebook on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles.
And lastly, but not leastly, Adam G.
Hey, so you can find me at CassidyChronicles.com. That has links to everything if you poke around. But if you don't feel like poking around, I'm also on Instagram and Facebook as Adam Gaffen. My series is the Cassidy Chronicles. There are 3 books out now. 4th one comes out April 16th. And I'm writing the 5th one. So there's more coming.
And I'm telling you, if you don't do it out of me, out of love, do it out of spite. Check every one of these authors out. Well worth the time, honestly. I've just, I'm glad to have them in my life now and just like be able to call them peers. So this is the end of the podcast. Check with us when we, drop this Groupcast. Monday for the peer vlogs, Wednesday for the solo cast, and then we're going to start dropping these Groupcasts on Friday. So check us out on that. We will check out back at you. AR Sales, aka the AT podcast. Peace out.